two-time U.S. gold medalist and WNBA star Brittany Grenier is home following a prisoner swap with Russia. So now Griner, who was detained for a very small amount of hash oil, was recently traded for Russian arms dealer Victor Bout. Apparently I was saying his name wrong. It's Bout. Whatever. He's a Russian arms dealer. He's a bad dude. As Joe Biden would say, he's like Corn Pop. He's like a bad dude, right? Of course, the guy's got nothing on arms dealing compared to the United States, which is the #1 arms dealer in the world. But okay, that said, as soon as the trade was announced, members of the far right immediately melted down. They began crying. They called Griner an America hater, while slamming President Biden for allegedly choosing a queer black woman over a Marine named Paul Whelan, who has been detained by Moscow since 2018 on espionage charges, which are very, very likely faulty, but nonetheless, those are the alleged charges. Okay, so now note the date. He was detained in Russia in 2018. With that detail in mind, let's go to Donald Trump. So now one of the people leading the charge against the deal is none other than head chud, former President Donald Trump, who on his platform, of course,
truth essential.
He claimed that if he were president, he would have gotten Paul Whelan out. Now think about that for a second. Who was president in 2018? Oh, right, that would be Donald Trump. It wasn't
Obama.
Wasn't him. It wasn't him. No. Donald Trump. Okay. So now, wait, Don, you were president then. You had the power to negotiate with the Russians, who, again, were really trying to get Victor Bout back. Okay? And they're like, we would really like to trade some Marine. We have Marine Paul Whelan. We can, I don't know what the accent is. I'm sorry. We could trade him for one of, the people that, we have. Give us Victor Bout back, and we'll make this trade. And Donald Trump, apparently not all that interested. So it's funny, like, Donald Trump, if you're going to armchair president, which you're not president anymore, and that's what you're doing, you are armchair presidenting, then at least, try to make some sense. Explain why, when you had the chance, you decided not to get Paul Whelan out, or at least even attempt to do so. Well, then he goes into, of course, his website.
Truth essential.
And he explains, he says this, quote, "I turned down a deal with Russia for a one-on-one swap of the so-called merchant of death for Paul Whelan. I wouldn't have made the deal for 100 people in exchange for someone that has killed untold numbers of people with his arms deals." Now, note the irony here. Donald Trump saying, "Oh, this guy, arms deals. I wouldn't trade anyone who did, all these arms deals that killed so many people." Bro, you have been supplying Saudi Arabia arms to do a genocide in Yemen. I'm sorry, did you forget about how much money and how much arms we have sent Yemen? Or I'm sorry, Saudi Arabia to destroy Yemen? Seriously? That was the Trump administration, also the Biden administration, but Trump administration, they're arms dealing to Saudi Arabia so that they could kill lots and lots of people, innocent people. Yeah, of course. I completely forgot about it. Amazing. So, that said, the obvious question here is, if you weren't going to take a deal for Bout, then how would you have got him out of prison? He's not in prison in the United States. Whelan wasn't in prison in the United States. He was in Russia, and we had Bout. So if you weren't going to take a deal, how are you going to get Whelan out? I mean, that's the obvious question, right? No answer. No answer at all. Again, does he not understand? Oh, maybe he's like, you know what I would have done? I just would have had to talk to my friend Vladimir Putin, and we would have made the art of the deal. That's what it would have been, art of the deal, and I would have gotten out Whelan, and I would have gotten out everybody if I had just been president at the time and was president now. You weren't president at the time. Look, the reason Paul Whelan obviously is not out and still is in Russian prison is because Russia was unwilling to include Whelan in any deal. That's just a fact. Look, there's not a lot that you can do when the other party doesn't want to negotiate. You can continue to try to put offers in front of them, but at some point, you're going to run out of offers that are acceptable to you. Again, maybe you could also ramp up pressure on them. Sure, there's other kinds of political pressure that you could put on them to bring them to the table to make a deal. And, that is certainly something that maybe Biden could do. The door is still open on that, where he could, maybe be a little bit more aggressive, but not too aggressive, because you really have to walk that line, right? Because you could go too far as to sabotage any future potential deal. It's called like diplomacy. Yeah. And things, tremendous things. But anyway, look, I recall that when news came out about the swap, and this goes to a little bit of media disinformation about this, which fueled the outline outrage. There were a lot of people claiming that Biden had a choice on who to bring back. Now, one of the reasons for that turns out an NBC report, which had erroneously read this. The official said Russia has treated Whelan differently because he's an accused spy, and that the Kremlin gave the White House the choice of either Griner or Whelan or none. Huh. Wait. Now, obviously, that's wrong, and people would come away and be like, "Oh, why would they choose one and not the other?" So now this is the right wing saying, "I can't believe that you would choose a two-time Olympic gold medalist who happens to also be an amazing athlete, the queer black woman." They think, well, of course we don't want something like that, somebody like that back in the country. Whoa, we hate that. We hate queer women. We hate black women. And we don't care about the WNBA. We don't actually care about women's sports at all, even though we're going to, bitch and complain about trans girls competing in women's sports like we actually give a damn. Look how much women in the WNBA get paid. The whole reason Griner had to go to Russia is because they do not pay women to play sports. I mean, the pay is abysmal. Oh, but they care so much about women. They care so much. Right. But anyway, like I said, that report ended up being corrected just hours after the outrage, about 6 hours later. NBC, what are you doing? I mean, that's a disaster. Something's going on at NBC. And I say that because they also did the same thing with the Paul Pelosi story. They put out something that was just wrong, and then they had to backpedal, which in turn, of course, fuels right-wing conspiracy theories on Twitter. But there was more from Trump. Now, on Sunday, he said that although he had turned down the deal with Moscow, he would have gotten her out, and then would have gotten Paul out, but then also talked about Griner, saying, quote, "The deal for Griner is crazy and bad. The taking wouldn't even have happened during my administration." Well, would you have made sure that the WNBA, female athletes were paid more? Because that would have really stopped it. That would have actually prevented this from happening, prevented her from having to go to Russia. But then he added, "But if it did happen, I would have gotten her out fast." How? You never explain any of this. How? It's because he doesn't have an explanation. Never explains how he's going to do anything. And, I would have gotten Paul Whelan. I would have gotten Brittany Griner. I would have stopped COVID. your response on COVID was drinking bleach and sticking light bulbs up your ass. I don't think you're really qualified to talk about any of that stuff and how you're going to do stuff, especially since during your watch there was failure after failure after failure. He couldn't even build a wall that would stay up. It's amazing. It's amazing. Wow. No, the man is an idiot. Stupid. And he still talks as if he could have solved all these problems if he had been elected or elected again. And, and this is after proving for at least 2 years of full GOP control. I'm talking they had the House, they had the Senate, they had the White House for 2 years. Until, they got wiped out in the House come, 2018, the midterms. They had all of that, and they still couldn't do a damn thing. They passed tax cuts for the rich. That was their big legislative priority, is passing more tax cuts for the incredibly wealthy. But that's all they wanted, really. Everything else was garbage. And as far as diplomacy, again, Trump had no idea how to govern and has no idea how to do diplomacy. He had a chance to help denuclearize North Korea. I was like, hey, look, if Donald Trump can do this, that would be amazing. Because guess what? We want a denuclearized North Korea and a denuclearized world. That would be fantastic. Let's go. Hey, Trump, pull it out. I mean, you and Kim Jong-un, you're writing love letters to each other. Okay, use it for good. Use that relationship for good. But of course, he couldn't deliver. And what's North Korea still doing? Their nuclear program. Of course. He blew it. He's all talk. Now, I have a video for you. And this is on Sunday, a former Trump White House national security official. This is Fiona Hill, who said this about Donald Trump's real priority when it came to getting Paul Whelan out of prison.
Well, look, at the particular time, I also have to say here that President Trump wasn't especially interested in engaging in that swap for also Paul Whelan. He was not particularly interested in Paul's case in the way that one would have thought he would be. Ambassador Bolton met with Elizabeth Whelan, Paul's sister. I was at that meeting as well. There was a lot of attention being paid to this and trying to find ways of arranging Paul's release by all different parts of the US government.
Huh. Oh, weird. He just wasn't as interested in this. Just, not at all interested in the way that, in this case, the way that he should have been, getting back a Marine to the United States. Yeah. And look, she's not the only one. David Whelan, Paul's brother, also said this, quote, I think the first 2 years, partly, I think the Trump administration was not prepared to or not interested in working on wrongful detention cases. And then gave actually props to the Biden administration, even though Biden failed to be able to get Paul Whelan out. Here's what he said, quote, the Biden administration is much more engaged in wrongful detentions, meaning that, of course, they're trying, adding that the president has given the government more tools to help wrongful detention families, but also to try to start to punish the nations who are doing that. Whelan also then took a shot at Donald Trump, another one, saying, former President Trump appears to have mentioned my brother, this is on Twitter, Paul Whelan's wrongful detention more in the last 24 hours than he did the 2 years of his presidency in which Paul was held hostage by Russia. That's because he never cared. He only started to care about Paul Whelan's case when Brittany Griner was freed. When Biden actually successfully used some diplomacy and did a prisoner swap to release Brittany Griner. By the way, she was absolutely taken for leverage as a political prisoner. And so, yeah, while the Biden deal wasn't fantastic, Griner is home, And the whole point, again, of Russia taking her is just to try to get some leverage in order to get back something that they want. So it was a huge setup by Russia, of course, and it, of course, could have been avoided by, I don't know, actually being able to pay women athletes, in women's sports, what they deserve, instead of getting ignored and getting screwed over for their athletic talents just because they're women. Griner is a black lesbian woman. It's a trifecta of hate for them, says Woozle 1967. That's true. That's true. But anyway, that said, I actually really enjoy it when there are attempts to use this situation as an attack against Biden, who actually did something good bringing her home, are blowing up in their faces. Especially Donald Trump. Because again, for all the points that I've made, they cannot handle the other side doing something good, especially when they had the chance to do it and actually would have gotten credit for it. They can't even admit that getting Griner home from a prison camp in Russia is a good thing, because again, they hate queer black women, and believe that somehow, in some way, Donald Trump would have magically done better, even though, again, he had the chance to do so and refuses to say how he could have done it, even after he didn't do it, or how he would have done it if he could go back and do it again, which he wouldn't.